International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
May I have your attention as we introduce our special guest who is going to come forward to introduce more special guests. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to bring to the stage and to bring to this program today this phenomenal woman who is a CNN political commentator, NPR political analyst. She is CEO of Impact Strategies. She has a track record of impact as a political strategist over the years, regular on-air commentary with several social media outlets, as well as television, BET, CNN, HBO, HuffPost Live, TV One. Her depth and dialogue ranges from political to the most complex legislation conversation. She's phenomenal. She's fantastic. She's a beautiful, awesome woman, both inside and out. Would you kindly make some noise and give a rainbow push tech welcome to Miss Angela Rye. Let's hear it, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. So you didn't have to listen to my introduction, but I am demanding that you listen to this one. Congresswoman Barbara Lee represents the 13th District of California. As one of my former Congressional Black Caucus bosses, the thing that I've learned most about or from Congresswoman Lee is the importance of being an advocate far beyond your congressional district and ensuring that you always have representation for your issues regardless of where you live in this country, and frankly, regardless of where you live in the world. She is a tremendous advocate. I learned from watching the Shirley Chisholm documentary that so much of her inspiration came from working on Shirley Chisholm's campaign. And just like Shirley Chisholm, she is unbought and unbossed. And she will always continue to represent our issues and ensure that we have a voice in the United States Congress. She serves on the Appropriations Committee. She is not yet endorsed in this election, so I'm not going to ask her about that on this panel. But it is great, with great pleasure, and I'm so honored to bring her up, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Thank you very much, Angela. First, let me thank you for that very generous introduction, but also just say to you and to all of you here today, what a wonderful job Angela did as director of the Congressional Black Caucus. It was amazing. Her intellect, her energy, her heart, she kept us all, what was it then, 42 members, 43 members together. And now we're so proud of you. Just look at her now and what she is doing, being our voice on so many issues, not only, again, in America, but throughout the world. Sometimes when I'm wherever I am, I see you, Angela, late at night talking about an important issue of the day. And I always feel good because I know that you would be telling the truth about what is taking place. So give Angela a round of applause and thank her very much because she works very hard. And I'm just going to speak for just a minute about what Reverend Jackson, the importance, as you know, of what Reverend Jackson is doing. But my district, for those of you who don't know, is right across the bay, in the East Bay, the 13th Congressional District, which includes Oakland, California, Oakland, where young people in my district really hold and can fulfill Oakland's promise of equity and inclusion and equality and justice in the tech industry. And I have to say how proud I am of our young people in the East Bay who are really challenging all of us to live up to what we are supposed to be doing in terms of our fight for total freedom and justice. And so I just want to commend and thank all of you for being here and really giving us the roadmap on how we make sure that there is inclusion, justice, and equity in the tech sector. The Congressional Black Caucus established Tech 2020. I co-chair that with Chairman Butterfield, but I have to just say it was Reverend Jackson who pushed us and who insisted that the Congressional Black Caucus take up this mantle. And I was very proud to do so because I know in my district for years and years and years, being next door to Silicon Valley, the fact that my constituents did not have access to these wonderful opportunities that the tech sector provides. I have case after case after case of exclusion. And so when Reverend Jackson mounted this with Rainbow Push, I just wanted to say, give Reverend Jackson a round of applause because he has the United States House of Representatives now in check and on point, insisting that we use our leverage and what we can do as these companies come before us to make sure that the issues that we're here to address in these few days are become the part of the culture of the tech sector. Make no mistake, Reverend Jackson is a national treasure, as you know. He is an icon. I had the privilege to meet Reverend Jackson. This was in 1972 at the National Black Political Convention. And ever since then, I have witnessed and worked with and know what he has done to change the political landscape of America. If it weren't for Reverend Jackson and of course his 1984 and 88 campaign, there would not be a President Barack Obama in the White House. And so we have to salute Reverend Jackson for that. For many of us who were involved in the Rainbow Coalition and in all of the grassroots efforts to register 8-9 million more people in our country to vote, to get out to vote, to engage in voter education, voter mobilization effort. I can tell you, throughout the country, there are many of us who are elected. There would be no Congresswoman Barbara Lee had it not been for Reverend Jackson. And I say that every day. So Jesse, once again, thank you for that. Thank you. So Reverend Jackson is a warrior. He's a change maker. He's an inspiration. When you look at what he has done globally, whether it was in Syria, a lot of us forgot what he did in terms of helping to negotiate the release of hostages from all over the world, Syria, Cuba, you name it. Reverend Jackson not only is a national treasure, he's a global leader. And many of us who work on the foreign policy front really look to Reverend Jackson and talk to him and learn from him about our responsibility as global citizens as it relates to peace and justice and fighting for alternatives to war. And for that, we owe Reverend Jackson a debt of gratitude. Thank you, Jesse, once again for that. And so I could go on and on about Reverend Jackson. You know his history from Greenville, South Carolina, a confidant of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who paved the way, who fought and marched for the Voting Rights Act, for the Civil Rights Act, for the war on poverty. Reverend Jackson has been there in the day, and he is there in this day for all of us and for the future. And so thank you, Jesse, very much for being here, but more importantly, thank you for once again taking the mantle and fighting for justice and inclusion and equity, and most importantly, for freedom. Thank you again, and come forward now, and we're going to give Reverend Jackson a standing ovation, please. He is like a national treasure and a global leader.
Okay, good afternoon again. So this is called a Fireside Chat, but it's the afternoon, so I'm going to call it Family Talk. And I have sufficiently briefed the panelists, I believe, to be candid. That doesn't mean they won't be smart in their words. We know that there's Twitter happening, there's Snapchat happening, there's Instagram videos happening. So we will be slightly filtered, but we will still be candid. What I wanted to start with, Congresswoman, is kind of where you ended up in your remarks, and that is, you somewhat referenced Operation Breadbasket, and the fact that we know, of course, that you led those efforts in Chicago, Reverend, and of course that resulted in Rainbow Push. You founded Operation Push in 1971, the same year that the Congressional Black Caucus was founded. You all have been partners for some time. You were not there for the founding, but you did work for founder Ron Dellums, who of course is also beloved here and all over the country. You then referenced the National Black Political Convention. And this isn't tech, but I want to start here because I think, Reverend, if we're honest, and Congresswoman Lee, if we're honest, the reason that you all are pushing on tech in this way is because of some of the lessons learned from that National Black Political Convention in 1972. And where I want to start is, where is our National Black Political Convention today? Don't we need it now more than ever?
May I make an appeal, an exception? I wish that we would, for a moment, alter what we're doing and prepare to pray for Prince. I could not help but think about him because he died, because I'm looking at Reverend Amos Brown sitting here. When Dr. Amos Brown went to Morehouse, as did Dr. King. I met Dr. King, introduced me to Reverend Amos Brown. He was the pastor in Minnesota, where Prince is, before he came to San Francisco. And Prince was not only a global music icon, he also went to Flint. He also went to Ferguson, Missouri. He also fought for freedom to break chains. I think that he means a lot to us, and we would be remiss if we didn't stop for a moment and bow heads in prayer for his life and living, for his soul to rest in peace. Amen.
Okay, Congresswoman Lee, do you want to start with the need for a National Black Political Convention now? Because it was an opportunity for us to develop and at least discuss our political agenda, our economic agenda. And again, going back to the tech industry, this is a part of that.
Sure. I think when you look back at black political power in the United States, we can even go back before the 1972 Black Political Convention. It's important, I think, for the African American community to continue to have an agenda, but an agenda that's relevant to today. Reverend Jackson always talks about we've achieved our, in some respects, political freedom, even though the Voting Rights Act now has been gutted and we're trying to actually move forward with a new Voting Rights Act, but we still have not achieved equality. And in a country that prides itself on liberty and justice for all, when there's not liberty and justice for all, those that have been shut out and disenfranchised need to come together, need to organize, need to mobilize, and petition their government, which is part of who we are as a country, to ensure that equality and justice becomes real. That has not happened, and I think we absolutely need to exercise our political power, which we have, but we need to come together and do it. And if a convention's the only way that we could do it, then yes, we need to come together at a convention and do it. But we need to exercise our political power because we have economic power in this country, we have political power, but we are definitely not exercising it.
The point really was to build a consensus around an agenda. The context of the 71 convention in Gary, we got the Voting Rights Act in 65 for the first time in 85 years. We're trying to figure out how to deal with whole new terms. What did gerrymandering, annexation, at-large, roll purging, that meant nothing to us. We were learning what that meant, a difference between at-large and the proportionality. It took us from 1965 to 1990 25 years to get from the right to vote to the right to use the vote and get elected. That's right. Second thing, Dr. King was killed April 4th, 1968. And Robert Kennedy was killed June 4th, 1968, June 5th. And there was a sense of what do we do? Hatch had just been elected mayor of Gary, Carl Stokes, Cleveland. We had not had a black mayor in Detroit, or Oakland, or LA, or Atlanta. So the whole world was much littler, for lack of a better way to put it, at that time. And so today, what is the common agenda today? This is what I would call as the fourth phase of our struggle. If the first phase was to end legal slavery, the civil rights agenda was abolition. That was the agenda. Whatever, fighting Jim Crow, the agenda was to end lynching without reprisals and legal segregation. That was the agenda, whether you came together or not. Then the right to vote and to let the vote count was the agenda that transcended all other items. But one can be out of slavery, out of Jim Crow, have the right to vote, and starve to death without access to capital, industry, technology, and deal flow. So now we're in that phase of our struggle. Does that mean that there are not some evidence of slavery and segregation, this and that? But the fact of the matter is, if I were to ask, and this is not designed to embarrass but I'm trying to make a point. How many of you are active members of the NAACP? Like active members? I see about 20 hands. How many of you are active members of the Urban League? How many volunteered to come to the Push Tech conference? You volunteered to come to this conference today. You volunteered to come to this conference today. What it means, that does not mean that those organizations are not relevant. What it means is that today's agenda, they're interested in access to capital. And this is this phase of the civil rights struggle. Civil economics is this day's main agenda. There may be some other subtopics. So, for example, we know November the 8th is a due date for all of us. We're either going to have Hillary and Bernie, some such combination, or Bernie or Cruz and Trump, some such combination. We don't need a convention to know what the choices are. It's fairly clear that the choice between the right and the left are very distinct. But what it does mean, it seems to me, is that we have a deeper issue, and that is not the right to vote, but not to surrender with the right to vote. We're losing too many elections by the margin of not participating. That's surrender. It's a different phenomenon than the right. Barbara, for example, in Louisiana, there are 500,000 blacks unregistered to vote. We know the defense is trying to keep us from voting. 500,000 unregistered. Both Romney and McCain beat Barack in those states by less than 300,000 votes. We have the power to turn red states blue. The only southern state that signed the Affordable Care Act was Louisiana, because blacks did vote. We have power, unused power laying around. South Carolina has 900,000 blacks registered. We lost the governor's race by 60,000 votes because 400,000 didn't vote. That's surrender. That's a spiritual malaise. We lost the Detroit election here a few months ago, 530,000 registered, 100,000 voted. No one has the right to spend more than they have and vote less than they have and expect to win. You cannot spend more than you have and vote less than you have and expect to win. You get my drift? So that means we have to even dig deeper for political. The agenda, November 8th, is to sustain our gains.
Yeah, let me just add to that. We need, whichever candidate wins, we need an agenda, though, that involves and includes access to capital and all of the unfinished economic issues that we need to agitate for and continue to fight for. But in addition, one of the fronts now that we have to deal with and understand is institutional racism and structural racism, because so much has happened since legal segregation has ended in terms of the structures including in many of our sectors, industry sectors, including the tech sector, where the unconscious bias studies, for example, have been in some of the companies, been very revealing. And so we have to really understand how some now on this front, attitudes that have not been about justice and equity and equality, how those attitudes have played out in the structures and institutions of our country.
An unenforced civil rights law is like an Indian treaty. It's no law at all. Silicon Valley is built on the aerospace defense industry. All of these companies have a government foundation, all of them. From founding them, the government contracts, the tax evasions across to see whether they want to bring the money back home. We are not enforcing the law of government standards on these companies, EEOC and contract compliance. If we just force them to honor government standards and have hearings to that and go company by company, why don't your company look like America, which is the law? Yeah. Unenforced law is a big deal.
So really quick, you all have both referenced access to capital, and Reverend, you just ended on the enforcement mechanisms. One of the things that I want to call attention to is the CBC, the conscience of the Congress, and one of your good friends. Maxine Waters is the chair of the Financial Services, the ranking member. That was a Freudian slip. I want her to be the chair of the Financial Services Committee. 10 CBC members on the committee walked out to ensure that one provision would be included in Dodd-Frank, and that was for the offices of minority and women inclusion in every financial services industry agency in the government. Talk about why that's necessary and the impact that something like that has, not just on the agencies in the federal government, but why, when you look at Silicon Valley, Reverend, or if you think about some of the best practices you have from the Wall Street Project or the Automotive Project, why is something like that important? Why do CBC members, Congresswoman Lee, need to continue to make pushes like that? There are so many things like that that you all do that this room probably doesn't even know.
I was chair of the CBC during the negotiations around Dodd-Frank, and I have many, many stories about that. But this was an instance when Congresswoman Waters insisted that these provisions be included, the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion, in all of the government financial services sectors, or we weren't going to vote for the bill. We got them in. And that was because you had 40-some members of the Congressional Black Caucus standing strong with our members on the Financial Services Committee saying we're not going to vote for the bill unless this is included. And that's an example. And it was tough, though. The negotiations with the Republicans, with the White House, with the Senate, these were tough negotiations. But we exercised our political power and said, you don't get our votes unless this is included.
But now the motion is dying for lack of a second. We won, but without implementation, it does not matter that we won.
And the lack of funding. There now has been a move, and I'm on the Appropriations Committee, to not fund the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion.
We will have a major march with someone who got shot that shouldn't have got shot, but not march on being locked out and we shouldn't have gotten locked out. You see, sometimes our emotions are not driven by an agenda that can stop the shooter from shooting. Am I making sense to you? Mm-hmm. When South Carolina has a 32% African American population and less than 1% of state contracts, that's as offensive as an LGBT can't use the bathroom. To me, when a state has a $7 billion budget and turns down $14 billion on affordable health care, not only is it bad, but the federal government has a 45% of its state budget is federal. Why can't we leverage 45% to get the health care to 1 million people? So I see some lack of follow-through in the implementation of these laws. We should have our share of state contracts in South Carolina if 45% of the state budget is federal. We should have our share of affordable health care money in that state if they want 45% of the state budget to remain federal. We should have our share of state contracts if they want the state. Am I making sense to y'all? Unless you leverage your power, it's like not having it.
Doesn't that bring us back to where we are, though, with this tech conversation? You brought up the North Carolina LGBT law. I don't know how many CEOs signed on to this letter saying that this law, this provision, this law, being on the books means that they will not do business with that state. Where are those CEOs when we're raising those same questions?
Well, you have to be willing to fight. We've never lost a battle we fought, and never won the battle unless we fought. So when we were asking all these companies for EEO1 reports, they say they couldn't give them because we give them a competitive disadvantage. They filed a lawsuit. They won the lawsuit. They had the right not to give us the EEO1 data. See, we were then smart enough to buy shares of stock. Went to the shareholders meeting at HP and said, Madam Chairman, as a shareholder, 30% of our customers are African American and Latino. We don't have one of them on our board. Them. We don't have any of them on our C-suite. We're only hiring 2% of them. We had leverage from that power. And so now we have 4 members of the board from those 2 companies, HP, because we leveraged and fought. So everybody was giving it to us except Twitter. Twitter's it's called Black Twitter. It's 45% black and brown Twitter. So we declared on Friday that we were going to boycott Twitter with Twitter. That we were going to put 1 million petitions on the doorsteps of Twitter. That Monday we got the data from Twitter because we fought. We've never won a battle unless we fought. If you're too cute to fight, you're too cute to wear the crown. The crown goes to freedom fighters.
So,
am I here by myself? Say amen or something.
Congresswoman Lee, gotta love Reverend. So to the people in this room even who ask, why does the Congressional Black Caucus care about tech? Why does Rainbow Push care about tech? What's in it for you all? What do you say back to them, to the haters? Hi, haters. We're going to answer you now. Tell them. Am I making any sense, Reverend?
Makes sense to me. Stay right there.
Well, the last time I looked, we're all Americans, first of all, and we deserve equal opportunity and access to the benefits of this country.
That's the law.
That's the law. That's the Constitution. That's what I thought was America. Secondly, when there are injustices and when there are barriers and when there are industries and sectors of our government and our private sector that are not inclusive, we have to fight for justice and for inclusiveness. That's what it's really about. So it doesn't matter if it's whether it's the tech sector or any other sector, the biotech sector, the construction industry, the healthcare sector, wherever there is injustice and wherever there are people, groups of people who are excluded because of policies and institutional racism and institutional practices that don't allow for the full participation of everyone, then we have to fight. And the Congressional Black Caucus has taken up the fight on many, many fronts, just as Reverend Jackson has, to make sure that there's inclusiveness, justice, and equity and fairness in America.
We challenge Silicon Valley because it is government subsidized. And we pay government taxes. We challenge Silicon Valley because we are consumers with a consumer index greater than the returns. We challenge Silicon Valley because they are a growth industry at our expense. And our fight is to get our share of the growth. We have a right to be in Silicon Valley. There are jobs here, there are contracts here, and the companies belong to us as shareholders and as consumers and as taxpayers. So that we're not here with anything less than the full right to be here. And we went to Detroit back in the day to make cars, because cars made for jobs in the middle class. Whatever all the industry was then, Silicon Valley is today. And that's what we're trying to get 1,000 churches to get at least 50 laptops begin to enrich our children, teaching them codes and apps and stock market games and finance literacy. We're going to turn out 100,000 youth a year capable of learning financial language. And if we do that, we'll get our share of it if we organize and fight back, and that's what we plan to do.
And by 2020, there are going to be a couple of million unfulfilled jobs in the tech sector. Yeah. We want those jobs filled with African Americans and Latinos. That's the first thing. Secondly, when you look at the suppliers and the contract opportunities, for the most part, very few African American contractors have had access to those opportunities, which of course create jobs in our communities. And so this fight is not only for the tech jobs and the tech contracts. A large percentage which Rainbow Push has exposed in terms of over 40-50% of the jobs in the tech sector, in the tech companies, are non-tech jobs.
Non-tech.
Yeah. They're attorneys, they're lawyers, they're human resource specialists, marketing, advertisers. And so this is a serious move that we all have to make to ensure inclusion, because the growth in this industry is there. Our people use social media like none other, and we have a right to full participation.
But I say, but the best news for the companies is that inclusion is not a zero-sum loss. Right. It leads to growth. We didn't know how good baseball could be till everybody could play. When Jackie broke in, they went from 13 teams to 32. When Sweetwater Clifton and Bill Russell and that group came into basketball, it became a global phenomenon. So that what Silicon Valley has missed and the automotive industry has missed, we represent market, money,
means profits,
market, money, talent, location, and growth. And if we don't demand to be recognized for our investment, and they too dumb to recognize the power of our investment, we suffer from their dumbness. In other words, a one-eyed quarterback may be ever so bright, he just can't see the field. White people that can't see our talent, they can't see the field. And so they miss scoring because they can't see the field. We miss participation because we don't fight back. And so both must happen. Oh, can you imagine a baseball scout going out there and say, I scouted the country this year, and didn't see Hank Aaron, didn't see Willie Mays, didn't see Jackie Robinson, didn't see Campanella. He didn't see. What kind of scout was that? And whatever we are in athletics, we are in academics and science if given the opportunity.
So Butch told me I have one more question. And Reverend, you brought up Prince earlier, and of course we had a great performance earlier on by the young rappers, and the song was called Call to Action. So I want to leave you with this. After Trayvon Martin was shot and after George Zimmerman's verdict, Prince was having this conversation with Van Jones. And he said to him, you know, every time people see a young black man wearing a hoodie, they think he's a thug. But if they see a young white guy wearing a hoodie, they think, oh, that might be Mark Zuckerberg. That might be a .com billionaire. And then Van says that he responded to Prince, that's true, but that's because of racism. And Prince said, no, it's because we have not produced enough black Mark Zuckerbergs. That's on us. That's on us to deal with what we're not doing to get our young people prepared to be a part of this new information economy. They went on to start Yes We Code. And so, Reverend, when you look into this room of people who are both entrepreneurs, and Congresswoman Lee, you do the same thing, entrepreneurs, executives in these companies that you've talked about that may have one eye, but we have two people seeing very well for you up here. What call to action would you give these entrepreneurs, these folks who are providing access to capital, and these executives in these companies?
First, I would say Prince was right. We have to get out of our comfort zones. We have to march and we have to fight. You know, even though we're moving forward, we have to understand that we wouldn't be where we are today had it not been for the great warriors such as Reverend Jackson, who took to the streets and who engaged in direct action. Because I truly believe that it's going to be the power of the people, and many of you know I worked with the Black Panther Party for many years. It's going to be the power of the people that's going to push us into this new era. And so I would say personally, I admire and support the Black Lives Matter movement because they are telling it like it is, and we need to embrace the movements that are out there because these new movements of young people really see the future and they know what it takes to get the job done and to fight for liberty and justice for all. And we need to embrace, wherever we're working, whatever we're doing, we need to embrace what our young people are doing out there in the streets. Finally, let me just close by saying one thing about Cuba in terms of the tech sector. This is an opportunity. You know, I've been working for 40-some years trying to lift this embargo against Cuba, travel ban embargo. The tech sector have many opportunities now to be in Cuba and to begin to help develop the whole internet system and the tech sectors in Cuba. And I want to see some of our African American tech employees and businesses and coders doing international work. And I hope that you take advantage of these openings that are taking place now in Cuba, because it's a wonderful place to go to begin to really get to know the Cuban people, but also get to be on the cutting edge of wiring and providing access to social media and access to broadband and access to all the great, the skills and technology that you have here in America. So just know that's a prime opportunity for young African Americans to get involved in. Thank you very much.
You know, we must fight, but not be devoid of critical thinking. Dr. King reminded us we were in Watts in '63, I guess, during the Watts riot. Down in Watts, in South Central Latin, there is the power plant. Lights up all of Hollywood, Beverly Hills, all the way to the Pacific Ocean, all the hills. We had young blacks who were willing to die running past the power plant, throwing rocks in furniture stores, and liquor stores, and grocery stores. They were fighting, but without critical thinking. 10 of them could have closed, could have put the city under darkness. But 1,000 of them couldn't do anything but get shot. They were not critically thinking. I was in Ferguson, Missouri, with a group of young people. Now that we have seen this Michael Brown killed, it's time to fight back. Let's register and vote with a passion, because they had voted 6%. And because they voted 6%, they had right-wing political leaders over a majority black area because they didn't vote. So the students cheered, "You're right, Reverend." I said, "Let's turn pain to passion." They said, "You're right." When I'm the Reverend, the hell with voting, I'm going to get on down because we were past voting. I said, "Okay." I said, "Now, you mean if you were in the jury and that killer came to court that you would bust him?" "I'd bust him. I wouldn't punk out. I'd bust him." I said, you do know all of those are registered conservative on juries." He said, "Oh." He meant well, but he didn't have critical thinking. I read some of my Black Lives Matter allies said in the New York Times last Monday, "I'm not going to vote this year." Those who denied us the right to vote hope that we'll be successful in not voting. To not vote is to elect to not vote is to elect your adversary. So that's not critical thinking. And so I want to make certain that all motion is not progress. Zuckerberg is not where he is just because he's smarter and got his head on right. Effort and excellence matters. Say effort and excellence and hard work matters. Inheritance and access and perpetual laws matter more. So if you got all the right brains and can't borrow capital from the bank, you can't fund a good idea. Her grandma could cook better chicken than KFC, but she couldn't borrow the money to turn it into a chain. I mean, I want to hear this now, because if not, we'll end up thinking there's something wrong with us. If you got the size 10 foot and the size 8 shoe, ain't nothing wrong with your foot, something wrong with the shoe. Why there is not one Pepsi-Cola franchise in America tonight? Ain't gonna we ain't trying to get a Pepsi franchise. They let the territories before we had the right to vote. They go in the why we only have one Coke franchise in the world? Ain't because we're not entrepreneurs. Why we don't have a Hampton Inn franchise? They were not let to us. A Dunkin' Donut, a Krispy Kreme donut. So, and that's why critical thinking is important. And I would hope, lastly, thank you for what you've done for us, to be prepared when the opportunity struck, you stepped in because you were qualified, educated, and articulate, and could think a complete thought. It's important that we thank you for that, because it doesn't matter if we open the door and you can't get through the door. But on the other hand, if you don't get through the door and the door is closed, you can't get no concussion trying to get through a closed door. Say nothing is wrong with us. Something wrong with the shoe. Please don't cut your foot off.
Thank you.